Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Esther, the 5th chapter. And so, leaving off of the 4th chapter, we read about, Esther finding out about the decree that was given to exterminate all the Jews in the province, in the various provinces of Xerxes' kingdom, right, by the hands or by the plans of Haman. And we read about the prayers, right, of Mordecai and Esther to the Most High to deliver, the nation of Israel and to give Esther favor in the sight of the king to convince him to change his mind. So as we go into Esther, the 5th chapter, what I'm going to do is we'll go through the first 2 verses here, and then we're going to jump to the additions of Esther, the 15th chapter, as it gives a bit more detail as to this encounter, and then we'll come back and continue from verse 3. So this is the book of Esther, chapter 5, verse 1. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, the 3rd day of fasting, that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the house, or over against the gate of the house. So reading this in the NLT makes it a little bit easier to picture. So it says, on the 3rd day of the fast, Esther put on her royal robes and entered the inner court of the palace, just across from the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. So you can imagine, right, if you've ever done a 3-day fast, or more or less, even 2 days, it starts to take a toll on you, right? It starts to become hard to do your daily functions because now your body is running on less energy. So in the 3rd day of this fast, she is still weak, but she arrayed herself beautifully and then went before the king. Verse 2, and it was so when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. So keeping in mind that the law was that anybody that came there without being called, if the king didn't basically draw out his scepter for them to touch it, they would be put to death. So from here, let's jump to the additions of Esther chapter 15. Verse 1, and upon the 3rd day, when she had ended her prayers, she laid away her mourning garments and put on her glorious apparel. And being gloriously adorned, she called, after she had called upon God, who is the beholder and savior of all things, she took 2 maids with her. And upon the one she leaned, as carrying herself daintily. So you can imagine, well, number 1, she's weak, but number 2, typically you would have that other one for like support, right? It says, and the other followed, bearing up her train. So if you imagine her wearing along, those dresses that are long, super long, you can imagine this other maid holding up the end of the other side, so it doesn't just drag. And she was ruddy through the perfection of her beauty, and her countenance was cheerful and very amiable. And so you type this word in here. So it says here, amiable, having or displaying a friendly and pleasant manner. So even after having fasted for 3 days, right, she put on that appearance of cheerfulness, of looking good. It says here, but her heart was in anguish for fear. So she was pretty much terrified, but outwardly she had that pleasant look. Verse 6, then having passed through all the doors, she stood before the king, who sat upon his royal throne, and was clothed with all his robes of majesty, all glittering with gold and precious stones. And he was very dreadful. So you can imagine the sight she was seeing, right? She's already afraid, but now she's looking at him and he ain't looking too friendly right now. Then lifting up his countenance that shone with majesty, he looked very fiercely upon her. And the queen fell down and was pale and fainted, and bowed herself upon the head of the maid that went before her. So imagine the maid that she was holding onto, right? When she experienced this, it took all the energy left out of her, and so she ends up sort of like fainting onto the maid that was holding her up. And in this case, right, typically you have some people that can faint under pressure, and they can be fine, but they just got overwhelmed. So you can imagine that, plus the added effect of being weak already. Verse 8, then God changed the spirit of the king into mildness, who in a fear leaped from his throne and took her in his arms. See, so the Most High changed the spirit of Xerxes here from that fierce look of, who is this? Why are you here? You weren't called. What's going on? Right? Onto, oh, shoot. You know, like now it's like going from a cloudy, dark day to just the sun shining out of nowhere. So he quickly goes, right? He takes her in his arms till she came to herself again. Right? When somebody faints, you know, you rush towards them, you know, you're trying to give them air, talk to them, shake their face a little till they come to. It says here, and comforted her with loving words and said unto her, Esther, what is the matter? I am thy brother, be of good cheer. Now, this I am thy brother is not a literal sense. You can imagine it as if somebody's saying, like, I'm here for you, like, you know, that kind of thing. Just like when the scriptures talk about somebody being your rib or your bone of my bone or flesh of my flesh, it's not literal. And we know that clearly Xerxes wasn't the brother of Esther, neither were they even of the same nation. Verse 10, thou shalt not die, though this might be a typo here, our commandment be general, come near. So even though this law is applicable to everyone, you know, you're not going to be subject to the penalty of death here. So as he says, come near. And so he held up his golden scepter and laid it upon her neck. So here, like I said, it gives us a different point of view, right? A bit more detail in Esther the 5th chapter here. You know, it basically just tells us how he drew out his scepter and Esther came and touched it. But now we're seeing, you know, what in detail, what was happening here, what the scene actually looked like. Verse 11, and so he held up his scepter and laid it upon her neck and embraced her and said, speak unto me. Then said she unto him, I saw thee, my Lord, as an angel of God, and my heart, meaning that look was majestic and almost fearful at the same time. And my heart was troubled for fear of thy majesty. And when she mentions the heart here, it's not the actual physical organ, but the mind. For wonderful art thou, Lord, and thy countenance is full of grace. And as she was speaking, she fell down for faintness. So now you can get the picture here that she's speaking to him, but she's probably not speaking with full energy. Imagine somebody who just fainted. They're still somewhat weak. They're probably taking breaks in between the words that they say, you know, getting a bit more air as they're talking, you know, in that kind of state, and then eventually goes back again. Then the king was troubled, and all his servants comforted her. So now, you know, you got, oh, hey, come, you know, make sure she's good, you know, all that stuff right there. Okay, so now that we got some detail, some context, let's go and continue here in Esther, the 5th chapter, verse 3. Then said the king unto her, what wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given, or it shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. So now we can imagine that verse 3 is after she's good, she has come to, you know, they've taken care of her. So now he's like, okay, what's up? What's going on? You know, what is it that you want? You came here, right? So anything you want, I'll give it to you, up until even half of the kingdom. Verse 4, and Esther answered, if it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So if Haman wasn't there, they probably went and called him. Hey, the king said, come on, we got a banquet to go to. And you can imagine him too. He's, oh shit, a banquet. Oh, the king invited me. Oh, hell yeah. He's excited. He's probably home pondering about how he can't wait for the time to exterminate the Jews. And now the king has invited him to a banquet. And this also reminds me, right, that Esther hadn't told anybody what nation of people she was from, right? And so this is actually good, because chances are it would have made its way to Haman's ears. You know, even though one can make the claim that if Haman knew that that Mordecai was a Jew, then he probably would have known that Esther was also a Jew. But then again, it's not, maybe that relationship between the two of them wasn't publicly known, that they were cousins. Okay. But anyway, long story short, so the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. So you can imagine they're at the banquet, they're eating, there's, things going on, and they're talking. So he's asking her, what is it that she wants? Then answered Esther and said, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. So she prepared another banquet. So, maybe she broke up this plan into two, right? If plan A goes well, which is to gain favor in the sight of the king, then plan B, do whatever it is she's trying to do at this other banquet she's planned. Verse 9, then went Haman forth that day, joyful and with a glad heart. They're all happy and shit. They're all merry and jolly, right? Everything is all sweet out here. Okay. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. So you can just, you could just imagine he's just like, just, he can't wait. He's like, he's inflamed. This is the reason why I want to exterminate his people. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself. And when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. He's bragging. He's like, feeling himself. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king onto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow am I invited onto her also with the king. See, so she ain't even inviting anybody, just me. So, he's pretty much like, I'm a top dog. Verse 13, yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Every time I walk past and I see this guy, he just irritates me, Verse 14, then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. So here it is. They prepared, and let's see if we can get some images on here. Gallows for hanging. So here it says, a gallows is a wooden structure used to execute people by hanging them as a form of punishment. So if you take a look here, you can imagine something like this, right? This or this. It's just designed to where you can hang a rope off of it, and then you can hang somebody off that. Typically, they would have them stand on like some stool or something, then they would kick it off, and then their feet would be hanging. You know how it goes. So anyway, he had this constructed, right? Yeah, this is good. Yeah, hell yeah. So we're going to kill his ass, and then his people after that. So anyway, that brings us to the end of Esther, the 5th chapter, and we'll see how, the story unfolds as we keep on reading through. But Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Wadash, and until next time, Shalom.